Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. And welcome, Brett, to the podcast for the first time. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm really excited to talk to you. As I mentioned, been practicing your beautiful yoga classes that you have so many of on YouTube. You have been sharing such beautiful courses and classes through your platform and trainings. And Brett is, a yoga teacher and healer, and you're in the field of Kundalini yoga and also somatics, which is so beautiful. And today, we thought that we would tap into speaking about trauma and burnout and many of these themes that we see. And I feel like it's been more and more of it for the past year. What have you also seen that
Yes.
around you?
Yeah, I think we're in kind of a backlash from the pandemic where everyone
Mm.
is exhausted, tired of screens, um, just feeling, I think, some of the effects of the technology that we've all been living with now for a decade, but that really got accelerated during COVID. So I
Mm.
think there's a bit of a, I don't know if backlash is the right word, but a fatigue that is really omnipresent in the collective.
Definitely. That's a really good point that it's everything has become so digital and so uh, also speeded up in that way. It was like a slow period and then the energy sped up like really quickly again. So I'm actually very curious about hearing from you how you got on this path of yoga.
I was someone who didn't initially think yoga was for me. I thought it was kind of wimpy and lazy and woo woo. I mean, I came from a dance background and I was doing a lot of Pilates, and it was really a friend. And I write about this actually in my first book. This story. It was a guy I wanted to date actually, and he was really into meditation. So I let him convince me to try meditation, and I kind of liked it. I wasn't convinced, but I started meditating with him, and then he really pushed me to do yoga. He said, "Listen, you love Pilates, you love dance, we're meditating. Why not try fusing them and doing yoga?" And I did, and I was really lucky because I lived in Manhattan at the time. So there was just so much great yoga available, so many different styles, so many different studios. So just started kind of dating all these different yoga styles. And the first one, of course, that I loved was Bikram hot yoga because it, made me feel like I had this intense workout and it was very competitive and you're looking at yourself in the mirror. And it felt very much like, the kind of dance world to me where there's that performative aspect of it. And I started figuring out, okay, this is great. But after a while, I burnt out literally of Bikram because you can only do hot yoga for so long. And I started saying, okay, well, what else is there? And that's when I really found myself exploring more styles and then eventually finding where I did my teacher training in New York, which is at a studio called Ishta Yoga, which stands for Integrated Science of Tantra, Hatha, and Ayurveda. So I was really lucky because I was kind of at the right school at the right moment. And that studio, that training really changed my life. It was the first place that I had an awareness. And again, I write about this in the book, but that I was not my inner dialogue, that I was not my thoughts. There were so many incredible teachers there that really helped me elevate my perspective and see that these negative voices in my head that were telling me to strive more and push harder weren't actually the real me, that was a voice that I could observe with awareness. And then kind of getting that elevated awareness became my focus. Um, did my teacher training, didn't even think I would teach. I think I'm certified now, close to 5,000 yoga teachers. So it's been like a very long and crazy journey, but suffice to say, I didn't think this is what I would be doing back then.
What an amazing journey. And it just, you have that dance background and having, I mean, it's such a different perspective, because dancing is also very performative, and then in yoga to get, I think many of us relate to that, to be how do you say, like, to be in that performance, you want to perform and achieve, and then in yoga you're supposed to like go within and not have that. So it's a beautiful balance. I love that. And you have created such a beautiful YouTube platform. You're also an author of Yoga Life. What is your book about?
The book is about designing a personalized yoga practice for your Ayurvedic constitution. It also has a ton of just fun tips, hacks to sort of integrate what I call yoga habits into your daily life. So even if you don't make it to your mat because you're busy or you're a mom, that you're still living key concepts from the Yoga Sutras. And what I found, because there's so many iterations of of the story, right? It's like starting the YouTube channel, which I did because I actually had to leave New York and move to the West Coast. And I started the channel really for personal reasons. I wanted to remember a lot of the sequences that I had been taught in New York and put together, or saw my teachers putting together. So it was sort of a place for me to practice, and I wasn't even expecting other people to find or watch the videos initially. So that's been a huge journey. And then the book really kicks off with the death of my father and the birth of my first son, which happened literally in the same, I want to say 6 month period. It was a very, very intense period. It was a period where my business was also experiencing rapid growth, which was a good thing, but it was sort of this convergence of entering into motherhood for the first time sooner than I thought, like a death portal, losing my father, who he was the person I was closest to in this world, the business sort of surging. And I realized I couldn't practice the kind of yoga that I had been doing up until that point, mainly because I had no time. There was so many demands, and I couldn't go to a studio. I couldn't do an hour class. I couldn't meditate for, 30 minutes, 40 minutes after, half an hour of stretching, or like all the things that I like to do. But from that kind of chaos and a little bit darkness, I put together a 10 to 20-minute routine, and it's modular, based on the poses that were uniquely healing for me. And I call these your soulmate yoga postures. And so the book has these quizzes where I help you as the reader kind of figure out what is your Ayurvedic constitution. And if your listeners aren't familiar with that, Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga. I always call it yoga's lost twin, because yoga was actually always meant to be practiced within the context of Ayurveda, because Ayurveda is affecting the elements within our body, like Bikram is increasing fire, as you might imagine. So knowing, your dominant element can really help point you into poses and a practice that's really going to serve to nourish you, because most people I find are doing a yoga style and a type of practice that's pulling them actually further out of balance. Because we're attracted to what we like and what feels familiar. And so this is where we have people with high air, which is the vata quality. I'm really attracted to Kundalini, for example, because that's all about energy ascension and lifting energy, but it's not actually what you need to come back into balance. So that's a little bit about the book, and you put together kind of this 20-minute thing with the quizzes and lots of kind of stories and anecdotes and habits along the way.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so great that you have like weaved together the physical asana practices and pranayama, and then also the Ayurveda, because I think that's a missing point, that we are not all the same, and we need to adjust the practices, also how we live and eat. And yeah, Bikram yoga maybe is great for someone who has that inner constitution that is cold, as we say in Chinese medicine. But it's also, like you said, if you do something too long and too much, it's like taking too much of a medicine. It's not good for you either. So I love that you brought that in.
Yeah, exactly. And then also noticing the seasons and fluctuation of your own cycles that you're
Mm.
in throughout life, right? Because
Mm.
something I talk about in the book is even taking that routine, and there might be seasons where you need to adjust it because you're pregnant, or because it's winter, or because it's the beginning of your period, or, there's so many ways that we need to adapt the practice to meet our needs rather than shoehorning ourselves into some sort of ideal pose. So even within, once the book is deep, right? Because it's like even once you find your personalized routine, there's kind of a piece at the end where it's like there's these certain life moments or certain seasons of life where you have to adjust. And, for me, when I was actually writing the book, I had very little time to practice. So I was doing a very condensed, because I had my second child. But, then there's seasons where you can expand that. It's a really, I think the more we can kind of titrate, which is a word from somatics, but the more we can have a basic yoga education, which is why I'm so passionate about yoga education, so that instead of following along to a teacher, you can kind of just know what poses work for you, how they're affecting your energy, how they're affecting your constitution. It's pretty simple to learn. And if anyone can learn this in the book, like what poses are affecting earth, air, and fire within your body, then you kind of become this apothecarian for yourself, right? Where you get to mix the perfect healing tonic for you, for your practice, no matter what life is throwing at you.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. And I love that it not just having this high expectation on our practice and making it a big thing, because I'm the same. I don't always have time, usually not 2 hours in my schedule either. But like today, I had a busy day all day, but when I came home, 10 minutes, and that was like enough for me to ground. And I have a mantra practice within the tantric tradition, and I try to get that in. If I can't sit in stillness, at least when I'm walking or biking, and still having that practice and awareness. So it's like it's good to have, to allow yourself to tailor it. And of course, it's great to have like the long and thorough classes when you can, because you're in the end, especially if we're going to come into that now, the burnout and trauma. And I feel very strongly with both of these how important, because I don't, you're really the expert on this, but I'm thinking about how the nervous system is affected by both, and they are interlinked. And it's like trauma can be something fast and like really strong. Stress can build up and lead to burnout, and then if you have both, it's like it's so much. So maybe we can speak about that, about those aspects, and then how do you see that? Because somatics feels more gentle and soft, and Kundalini also reawakens and recharges your nervous system and energy. But I would love to hear from you how you've worked with that.
Well, these are such rich topics. I mean, like each of these things you said, we could double click into for hours. And I love kind of how your mind is working. I think a couple things. One thing I like to talk about, if we want to start with stress, and then maybe we can come back to trauma. But stress is not an emotion. So when you're saying I feel stressed or people are stressed, my theory, or what I posit in the new book that's coming out, which is about somatic yoga, is that stress is a resistance to feeling something fully. And when we resist feeling something, it actually takes a lot of energy from the body to suppress and hold that thing in and down. So if we think of emotions as tunnels, it's like we can move through them. And we see this in young children. And I think you have maybe young child. I have children. So, they feel something fully, they cry, they have a tantrum, and then they're usually okay quite quickly. There's often quite a fast bounce back. And that's because they haven't learned yet this suppression tool. And we can suppress and hold what people call stress, but I would argue are incomplete emotional cycles in our body in different ways. So we have like the freeze response, the fawn response, which no one often talks about, but that's like the people pleasing response. We have fight and flee, obviously. And then the fifth one that no one often talks about is fatigue, which is where your body just shuts down and you can't get out of bed. And it's like your body just says no. So that would be like the most extreme form of burnout, which is the other piece we talked about. So when we look at stress as being a cycle, uh, which means that stress itself isn't the problem. The problem is that we've forgotten how to discharge stress. So a healthy human can experience stress. For example, we might argue that now our life is less stressful than it's ever been in history. We don't have predators potentially attacking us at night. We have ample food supply. We have ample shelter, most of us. Um, the human body's very well designed to cope with stress as long as it's a short burst, meaning like I run from the tiger or the lion and then I come back to my village and I do a tribal dance and I hug everyone. And that elevation of cortisol and adrenaline that I had when I was running away from the lion or fighting it gets to then come back down, and oxytocin and other hormones get to come back in as I stomp with my tribe, bang on drums, celebrate with them, hug. So that would be like the example of a stress cycle that completes. We felt the emotion fully. We discharged the lingering stress chemicals, and now we're back at that word balance, homeostasis. But unfortunately, and there's a variety of reasons for this, and I write a lot more about it in the book, obviously, but we don't do that in modern culture. There's so many reasons why. As we grow up, our education system really prioritizes us sitting still. We're told not to express our emotions. We're told crying is something to be ashamed about or sorry for, when really it's actually a natural discharge process. It is part of that discharge process after stress for many of us. So we've ended up and then our culture doesn't, and this comes back to what we talked about at the beginning, our culture isn't doing tribal dances anymore. We were actually in a time where we had to wear masks and not even get close to each other, let alone like hug each other. So we don't have healthy ways to discharge the stress cycle. And this is one of the reasons I think Kundalini yoga can be powerful, somatic yoga can be powerful. A lot of people have the assumption that somatic yoga is just gentle, but the way I teach it, that's actually not the case. It is, in some classes are very gentle, but, and I know you say you've practiced a little bit with me, so maybe you can vouch for this, but in a lot of the classes, we're trying to create safety and some gentleness up front, but then I'm trying to have you do movements that complete the stress cycle. We're kicking, we're punching, we're yelling, we're vocalizing, we're using our arms. Many of these movements are inspired by Kundalini yoga, where we see moves like bear claws or wood chopper, or, some of these more emphatic movements. My issue with Kundalini is it doesn't really bring emotion into it, which is why I find the somatic aspect so powerful. But let's just pause there and see if there's anything you want to click into and if that made sense, because I know that was a lot.
No, it totally made sense. Thank you for explaining it so well. And I think it's like makes so much sense, everything, how you described it. And like you said, I don't know if this is something, like you said, it's so conditioned to hold in and back. And I mean, that's different in different cultures, but I can say that here in Sweden, we definitely hold in and back. I mean, I lived in the US too. It's completely different. And then that I've noticed that too, that if something, I think with time, I realized that it's not seldom that I've held in and closed down as a response, and then it lingers. And then when I come to the yoga class, and it can be a completely like basic hatha yoga class, and then everything releases. So it's like, but how can we fight, because that leads to exhaustion. I feel like our energy centers get closed off and stagnated, and no wonder then when we have many of those that it can lead to burnout. And when it comes to the trauma, that like how would that be? I mean, trauma is something that also stagnates, right, within you, and then you have to release it. And it's so much, it can be like the mental, emotional, physical part of it. It's so tangible.
Mm. Yeah, trauma leaves an imprint. So, trauma is usually divided into two categories. We have big T trauma, which would be, something like going to war or surviving a car crash or sexual assault. These are more like one-time events that are completely overwhelming to the nervous system. And we often either shut down in that moment, we disassociate from the body in that moment to survive and get through whatever we have to get through. But again, that's then leaving us with unprocessed emotions and an incomplete stress cycle. On the other hand, we have what's called little t trauma, otherwise known as CPTSD, which is like complex PTSD, which instead of being one major event is like lots of little events, but over an extended period of time. So maybe that's a parent who constantly criticized you, or growing up in a home where there was someone who felt unsafe, who was volatile, who was unpredictable, or being at a very demanding job for, 10 plus years, or an abusive relationship, or things like that. And the biggest thing to talk about too with trauma is that, anything that you perceive to be traumatic is traumatic for you. It's not like it has to be big enough or it has to be a certain type of thing. If it is lingering in your nervous system, and what we see with people with trauma is they end up having faulty neuroception. And neuroception is like basically your ability to perceive what's going on in your environment accurately. This is maybe a cliche example, but just to make the point, it's like um, maybe you've been through some sort of sexual assault many years ago, and when someone quickly hugs you, it like you freak out like a well-meaning coworker, right? But when you're in a situation again that's maybe a little unsafe or with a predator, your body actually doesn't fight back, right? It kind of allows. I know when I worked in a trauma response center in college, it's really the statistics for repeat, like people who repeatedly have sexual assault is very high, because the body's it's like the body's confused in a sense. We no longer can perceive what's safe compared to what's unsafe. There's a disconnect between our thoughts, our sensations, our intellect, and then like our instinctual animal body response. So I think with trauma, it's like, how do we complete the stress cycle without re-traumatizing um, ourselves, which I think is where like somatic coaching can come in, or somatic, therapy. Um, but safety is the number one thing to focus on if you've experienced trauma. Like, and this is again where somatics is very powerful. It's like, where does my body end and the world begin? What techniques can I do to feel safe in my body? And for people in this situation, a lot of the very typical yoga things like close your eyes, notice your breath, those are not going to feel safe or comfortable for them to do. Lying on your back, looking at the floor, none of those things could potentially help this person feel safe. They might need to have their eyes open. They might need to work on what I call exteroceptive practices, which means orienting to your environment, understanding where you are in space. So in my somatic coaching program, that's like a key thing that we're working on, because people coming from the yoga world, yoga is really about like transcendence, samadhi, this like inner journey, that in many ways I feel is a disassociation from the body. If we look at like the ancient lineage of yoga, that's how yoga was originally practiced. It was practiced by old men and people in ashrams to like leave their physical body and get ready for the next life. So many of these practices that have been handed down or westernized. If you've been through trauma, or if you're trying to really take a more tantric approach or work with emotional release, they're actually not the most appropriate exercises.
That's such a great point, again, to have a tailored practice, and also for like there can be so many purposes, and maybe there's a purpose that we don't know, and benefits that we couldn't imagine. And most people come in and do, yeah, I think most people are actually on a deeper healing journey most of the time, but some people come in through different stages in life and perspectives. And like you, I was the same. Like the way I started with yoga is so different from where I am today. So it's really a journey with it, and finding the right thing. Like we also have the seasons, the inner seasons, and we need to, like, what do our bodies need? And I mean, throughout the cycle it can differ for us as well, depending on the energy level, the hormones. So I love the way you have both of these modalities. And I don't know if we maybe I should have asked this before. There might be some people who are not aware of the different, so most people know yoga but don't know that there's different streams of yoga. What is the defining Kundalini yoga for those who have maybe never tried it?
Well, Kundalini yoga is so interesting because it has, at this point, I would say, quite a sordid past, um, from its origins, and the key thing that I like to focus on, because I try to make Kundalini really approachable for people coming from a Hatha or Vinyasa background, which is usually the majority of people who are interacting with my content, is that Kundalini yoga is the yoga of awareness. So it's an energy elevating practice. At least most of what we've had handed down to us are practices to take what's called Kundalini Shakti, which is this energy that's said to live at the base of the spine or at the Dantian point in Chinese medicine, and to raise that energy up to the crown of the head. And again, then we're going back to this kind of enlightenment journey of bottom to top. And I think there's a lot of problems with that model, and it's a huge critique I have of Kundalini. So the Kundalini I like to teach is more hopefully balanced, right? We're not just focused on energy ascension. We're also focused on the downward current of energy. And this is what I call feminine form Kundalini, which is a more embodied somatic approach to Kundalini, because it's more focused on healing and inhabiting your body rather than like shooting energy up your spine to leave your body. Most of us are already living most of our life and day as a floating head in our heads, overthinking on Zoom, right? So I feel like these embodiment practices or focus on the current of manifestation, the downward current as opposed to the upward current, is so overlooked. That being said, there is definitely huge value in elevating your awareness. And that is a place where Kundalini yoga really shines, because it is drawing energy into the third eye, into the pineal, into the pituitary. But I do think, and the older I get, the more I'm seeing and truly feel that like these techniques need to be used in moderation, and they are, you really need to know, coming back to book one and your constitution and Ayurveda, you need to know your Ayurvedic blueprint, because I think there's a place where these practices, as I said at the beginning, can become appealing to us because they're working with energy that's already familiar to us. But that isn't actually serving to ground or balance us in the way that would be most helpful if we're not trying to transcend our body, but actually show up as mothers, partners, friends, parents, here in the world.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I would love for you to, so first of all, I can definitely recommend your beautiful YouTube channel. Can you name it and maybe explain what people can find there? But also for those who want to deepen their practice, you have trainings and it's all available online. So I think that's a great thing for people who are busy and can't take time off to be away for longer times.
Yes, the YouTube channel is just my name, Brett Larkin, BrettLarkin. You'll find me if you just put my name into YouTube because there's a lot of content there because I've been creating on YouTube for 10 years now. So it's fun because I've been there so long. You also can see so much of my evolution, right? So if you want like really hatha detailed alignment, just do like Brett Larkin Hatha and you'll find those, or Brett Larkin Kundalini, you'll probably find, even Kundalini videos from a couple years ago were more energizing than the ones I teach now. So you can always look at the dates. And then primarily right now I'm posting somatic yoga, which is where you get to kick and shake. And, we always create safety first, but those classes have a lot of music. They're really like fun emotional capsules. Like I just released one for women for guilt and shame, releasing guilt and shame from the body. So those are all completely free. I also have my own podcast, the Uplifted Podcast. And then, yeah, thanks for asking about the trainings. They are completely online. So we have, I think, 30 or 40% of our student base is from Europe, which is always really cool, I think. So we have people from all over the world. And if you are from Europe, you will not be the only one. You will be in very good company. And I think usually 15 to 20%, like it's very common that people don't have English as a first language. And that's also something that's not a problem because they can watch the replays. And one piece is that we ship you a manual. So even though the course is online, I do ship you a paper book everywhere in the world. There's a couple countries we can't ship to, but almost every country and definitely Europe, we ship you a paper manual. And I feel like that really grounds the experience because it serves as a workbook as well. Um, and the trainings all work the same way. You get mailed the book, you watch the content at home, and then you come together with what we call your cohort, your same group of peers and friends who you'll be with together every week for, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. It depends on the program. But I love that because it really creates friendships, relationships, this container where you're with the same people. Um, which I think is missing in a lot of online courses. You're just kind of showing up to big group calls or, you're not getting that tight-knit community aspect. And that's something we've been working really hard to cultivate. I've been training online for over 10 years as well, just crazy. Um, like 5 years before COVID, I put everything online. So online trainings have always really been my specialty and my passion because I just love taking people through a journey. So yeah, you can book a call and talk to my admissions team. You can look at all the programs online. But yeah, we love having folks from Europe and that diverse perspective. And there's trainings in Hatha Vinyasa, Kundalini, 200 hour, 300 hour, somatics, somatic coaching. Like there's a lot of options. So I always say book a call because you can, put together a curriculum that really makes sense for you.
Thank you. And I'm sure that the trainings are you have so much knowledge and experience, and I think you're especially great in this mercurial energy. You have so much knowledge and you communicate it very well. So you're a great teacher in that way, because I think that it can be so much to do. I remember my first yoga teacher training. It's really important to have like everything structured and understanding like the whys and how. And I love that also everyone gets this the book or the manual, because I think that's great to always go back to. And so we'll have the link in the show notes for you and for your website, and you're also on Instagram and other social media platforms. And I think for anyone who's listening, if you want to tap into Brett's work, for me, like your yoga classes on YouTube have been a great support for me. And you can choose the length of class and the type of class, and then you get a taste for it. And also both Kundalini and the somatics and So I love that. And is there anything else? So you have your book Yoga Life. You have a book also coming out on somatics. Who is that book written for?
Well, that book's written for really anyone who's curious about somatic exercise, but more deeply, I really would love yogis and yoga teachers to read it because I think it can really change the way you think about your practice and ideally help more people, whether it's yourself or serve students who've been through, trauma, kind of some of the things we're talking about that maybe a traditional yoga practice can't meet them in that place. So
Mm,
yeah. So thank you
exciting.
so much for having me. I really
Thank
appreciated this
you so
conversation. Thank you so much for practicing with me on YouTube as well. It's like a beautiful community on there. So it's so fun
much.
that we got to connect.
Yeah, I'm so happy that we got to. When I started practicing with your videos, I said I need to have Brett on and to share your work, and I think it's so beneficial, so beautifully done, very beautiful. It feels like you're also in the classroom, so it doesn't feel like a wall between between us. We feel your energy as well. So thank you so much for all the work that you do and everything you shared today.
Thank you.
Thank you.